Thank you, Adam, so much for joining me. I've got a lot of questions for you, but first, tell me a bit about yourself, your family, what you do now.
So my name's Adam. I'm a physiotherapist. Day to day, I've actually been off work for the last couple of months. I'm self-employed. I'm married to Alice. Got married in 2008. I've got two kids, two living kids.
You just said, which is quite a shocking statement, I've got two alive kids.
20 years ago, I paid for an abortion with an ex-girlfriend. It was just before I met Alice, my wife. I was a young man. I would have been in my mid-20s at the time. She was about to join the army as a nurse, as an army nurse. I was in the Army Reserves, and I was going through an intensive training course with them. And it just wasn't the right time. It wasn't in the plan. And to me, at the time, having an abortion was really nothing more than going for a tooth extraction. That's how I viewed it. It just wasn't my issue at all. It was her issue, not my issue.
Right.
It was her problem, her choice. I didn't feel it was something I really had any input into. And to be perfectly honest, it was so obvious what the choice was that I never even considered that there was any other choice to be had, really, at that time.
What was the day after like? Was she upset? Were you like, did you feel a heaviness, or was it just relief, like a weight had been lifted?
It was relief. It was
Right,
relief.
okay, that's helpful.
So the abortion industry are quite right. You know, when a woman has an abortion and if their partner's with them, there is a sense of relief. I did have a tremendous sense of relief. You know, oh, thank goodness for that. It's done. We can get on with our lives. It's all over. And when you do, a lot of the surveys that they do, you know, BPAS will release a survey that says, I don't know, it might say something like 90% of women who have an abortion have no negative effects. But when you look at the small print, when you actually look at the research, you'll see that it was conducted 2 years afterwards or 5 years afterwards. My challenge to the abortion industry would be, how about 40 years afterwards, 20 years afterwards? How about then? How about, you know, as people are approaching the end of their lives, how do they feel about it? I think you'd get a very, very different survey response there.
Wow. Yeah.
You know, I was brought up atheist. I was a hardcore materialist. So when I went through this abortion experience, that's where I was at. I did a personal development course that it wasn't a Christian thing. It wasn't a religious thing in any way. It's just purely personal development. And essentially, you're locked into a room for 3 days and people mull over their issues and so on and so forth. My brother did it and said, Adam, you should do it. So I did it. But one thing that I noticed, maybe because of my own abortion story, possibly, but a lot of women were putting up their hands and abortion was an issue for them. And that was the first time I thought, I didn't think it was, I still didn't recognize it as my issue, but I did recognize it as an issue for women. And that my ex-girlfriend, I wasn't with her by this stage. She was ex by that stage, but it made me think a little bit more, think about her actually, and that perhaps I hadn't quite realized how big a deal it was for her.
Right.
But yeah, woman after woman would put her hand up and say, yeah, I had an abortion and I haven't recovered from it. It's still affecting me to this day.
Because you don't really hear people talking about that openly, do you? You don't hear
No,
many people say, I regret that decision I made.
no. It was a safe space. People knew that nothing would go beyond those walls. That was the deal. And that's how women were able, perhaps felt the confidence to
Yeah.
put their hands up and talk about that as an issue.
And so you mentioned as well that you were in the military, and that you
Yes,
were that you had a medical background with the military. So
yes,
after you did that, you also helped and volunteered to assist in abortions,
yes,
D&C abortions,
yes.
and you did over or about 30
I,
approximately.
I was, um, it was medical training. I did a hospital attachment, and whilst I was on, it was mainly an accident and emergency, uh, and it was a great experience because you know, to get hands on and treat patients. And one of the doctors said to me, "You should go to the abortion clinics because they're quick procedures, 15 minutes in and out, airway management, cannulations, and yeah, it'd be a good experience for you. Would you be all right with that?" And I thought it was strange that he would even ask me, "Would you be all right with that?" At the time, I said yes, of course. You know, to me, this is just how it was just a healthcare procedure, just a quick in and out. You know, as far as I was concerned, this wasn't really any different to the people coming in for an ingrown toenail.
Did you see anything that you felt was wrong, unethical, that kind
Yes,
of played with your morals?
it, yes, I remember thinking this at the time. Actually, uh, was there was one of the women that came in. They did the abortion. These were first trimester suction abortions, so the fetus would have been small, you know, maybe the size of a kidney bean. I was at the top end with the airway management and the cannulations. But there's this one particular procedure where the doctor had done the abortion, was about to sort of finish and wake the lady up when one of the nurses said, "Oh, you haven't put the coil in." And he suddenly remembered and did, did the coil. And the nurse was telling me the money involved, how much money the doctor would get for that coil and the procedure itself. You know, he was making a lot of money out of those abortion procedures. So that stuck in my mind. And the other thing that stuck in my mind was one of the nurses said, I wonder if there'll be a crying today. And I asked, what do you mean? And she said, well, often after the procedure in recovery, the women can all, once one of them starts crying, they all start going.
Mm.
And she, yeah, I distinctly remember that being said. So that, you know, the industry themselves know the emotional turmoil
Mm.
this causes women. At the time, it logged in my mind that comment, and at the time I didn't really think too much of it. But now thinking back, and now being on the other side of the fence, uh, you realize how much information is withheld from women. You know, women are
Interesting.
told, you know, this is just a routine procedure. You'll go in, you might feel a little bit sad afterwards. It's the information that's withheld from them because they know that on certain days the recovery room will be full of sobbing women because they've lost their babies. Their babies have been taken, and nobody would have even referred to that child as a child or as a baby because it was unwanted. But the woman knows that it's a baby. She might not know it at a a higher conscious level if you had a conversation with her, but there's a part of her that knows that she has a baby that she is pregnant, and when she wakes up after the procedure, they know that that child is no longer there.
What made you change your mind about this procedure being a tooth extraction to then the taking of a natural life? What made you change your mind?
It took me a long time, 20 years essentially. What changed my mind was Jesus. It's the bottom line. I became Christian in April 2017. I describe myself as a reluctant Christian. I've told you already, I'm a physiotherapist, and I would have these patients come on the couch, and I would have conversations with them. I might be massaging the back or manipulating a new tool. It's a bit like being at the hairdressers. You have a conversation there, but it's an intimate situation. You're in the room on your own, And Christian patients would talk to me, and a number of them said, have you ever thought of doing an alpha course? And I kind of thought, well, yeah, sounds interesting. You know, I don't mind doing development courses. Like I said, I did one years ago. In fact, I quite enjoy challenging myself and challenging my mind. So I did the alpha course, did a follow-up course, and then finally in April, having looked at all the evidence for the resurrection, for the life of Jesus, in April 2017, I said the sinner's prayer, and I felt, you know, the Holy Spirit. It was a real experience for me. I still didn't think anything about the abortion. You have to bear in mind, I didn't think about that abortion more than, you know, in 20 years, it hadn't even crossed my mind. I'd completely forgotten about it. It wasn't even on my mind. And when I was baptized, I had a real sense of being at God's altar and becoming a living sacrifice. I put my entire life on that altar. And I said to God, take away what needs to be taken away, give back what needs to be given back. And just a couple of weeks later, I had a graphic dream. I was standing at a table, a wooden table, and on this wooden table was a baby boy, a newborn baby boy. And he was in a fetal position, curled up on his front, and so he was facing towards me. I knew it was my son, but I knew it wasn't Patrick, my born son, but I did know it was my son. And I took out a large bayonet type knife, dagger, and I stabbed this baby hard in the left shoulder, so hard that the knife got stuck in the wooden table. I had to kind of seesaw the knife backwards and forward to pull it out. Then I stabbed the baby hard in the spine. The baby was looking at me with this expression of kind of bewilderment, of, you know, why did you do that? In the dream, I felt nothing. It's as if I was carving up the Sunday roast. If you know, the roast chickens on the table, you carve it up, you don't feel anything. You just carve it up and that's it. And that's how I felt in the dream. When I woke up, that's when the nightmare was. I woke, and my wife was next to me at the time, so she'll remember it. I woke up, and what horrified me was the fact that I wasn't horrified. It was the fact that I could carve up a baby like that, and I didn't feel anything. It was, how could I have done that in this dream and not feel anything at all? It didn't immediately dawn upon me what the dream meant. It took, you know, it took a little bit of time for it to dawn upon me, and then eventually the penny dropped, and I realized that was a message. It was a message about the abortion I'd had all those years before. That baby I paid to abort 20 years ago was very, very early in the pregnancy. It was as early as it can be, really. But in God's eyes, that is a precious, tiny little human being that has been given to us. And when we destroy that child, that's a human life that we're taking. It doesn't make a difference whether it's that big, or, you know, full-grown baby. It's a human life. I had to go through a journey to deconstruct my thinking on this particular issue. I still believed a lot of the lies, but what that dream did was it made me now question the lies that I had been told over and over again. The thing is, we're told a lot of lies through the media, through the BBC, and they're just repeated over and over and over and over again. And often they're very, very subtle, but they just drip fed into our consciousness over and over again. And then after a while, you don't question them. You just believe the lies. and you start to think, well, you know, if it's only that big, it's not really a human being. But then you do the research and think, well, it's not a cat, is it? It's not a dog. It's not the mother's DNA. If it's a boy, you know, mums don't have boys' genitals. It's clearly a distinct, whole, individual, separate human being from the mother, from the very earliest moments of conception.
And you said in your testimony previously that you, in your words, killed your child because of your career. If you were both not ready to be parents, if you both were not career-wise in a situation where you were ready to have a child, do you not think that that was the best thing to do?
Again, it's an absolutely absurd and ridiculous argument. If you had a born baby, you would never even use that argument. If the baby's outside of the womb and the baby's in your arms and you said, well, actually, I've got a career to think about, it's just not the right time for me to have this baby. I think I'm just going to kill it. It's just an absurd and ridiculous argument to say that your career is more valuable than the life of a human being. If it isn't the right time for you, then have the baby adopted. The reality is life is difficult, isn't it? And that's what helps to mold us and develop us into the humans that we're going to be. Either a human life is infinite value, in which case we fight to protect it, or it has no value, in which case, well, we can just kill anyone then, can't we? I can't honestly see how anyone could counter that argument.
I'd come back at you and say, yeah, you're a man. What right would you ever have to tell a woman what to do with her womb? You wouldn't live through it. It's nothing to do with your body. It's nothing to do with you. You know, the mental, the physical, the emotional toil that comes with pregnancy. How do you think that you have the right to even talk about this now?
That's a very effective tool that the abortion industry have used to shut 50% of the population out of the conversation. And yet, for some reason, the abortion industry have sold the lie that unless you've got a womb, you have no right to express an opinion on this subject. I'm a father. I've got 2 children. Because I didn't birth those children, does that mean I have no right to protect those children, to take care of them and look after them and provide for them financially? It's just a silly argument, really. When you pick it apart, it's just an absurd argument. Morality doesn't have a gender. Equally, you know, racism at the moment is a big issue in the press. I'm not a black man. I'm not someone who's ever likely to, certainly within Britain, suffer from negative racism. But I can still say that it is wrong to discriminate against someone in the job market because of the colour of their skin, even though I don't have black skin.
So so you believe that men should absolutely have a right to the decision as to whether the child gets aborted or not?
Well, it shouldn't even be a choice that we have. The reality is it shouldn't even be a choice. Men shouldn't have the choice whether or not the child dies or not, because the woman shouldn't have that choice. It's a human child. You wouldn't give the parents of a newborn, well, mind you, we're going there, aren't we? We're going to the situation where the parents of newborns probably will have the choice whether or not the child survives if it carries on the way it's going. But at the moment, you know, a doctor after a baby's born doesn't turn to the parents and say, you know, would you like me to save this baby or not? It's just instinctive. You just save the baby. And yet, for some reason, if the child is inside the womb, not only do they not save the baby, but they actively go and kill the baby. We know in our hearts that the most vulnerable members of our society are the ones most deserving of our protection and for us to look after them. And yet, for some reason, the law in this country says that because they're inside a woman's womb, they get absolutely no protection whatsoever.
Mm.
In fact, my dog, I'm a dog owner, I've got a pet dog, Barney. My dog has more protection under the law than a baby inside the womb. I mean, how can that be right? It just seems ridiculous.
And you also mentioned that it made you feel like you could just have sex without consequences, that it would encourage
Yeah.
other men to be having sex without consequences, and also that it would be more likely that men would use women as sex objects. What can you explain that to me?
The lie that we are told is that, it somehow empowers women, and it really doesn't. It empowers men to use women, which is essentially what I did. I think that it's an absolute lie to say that somehow my body, my choice is empowering for women. It's mainly empowering for men so they can abuse
Wow.
women.
And what would you say to support someone like yourself also that is post-abortive, especially for guys because they don't
Yeah,
talk about it much? I mean,
yeah.
you're the first guy that I've spoke to that is so open about it.
I actually went through post-abortive counselling, actually.
Oh,
So
did you?
I ended up doing a few counselling sessions with them, um, which I found really useful. And I'm not getting emotional in this discussion, which is probably a good thing. But back then, when it had dawned on me what I had done, I got upset. When I realised what I had done. But I think that was a necessary process for me to go through, was to confront the reality of what I had done. And I ended up naming the baby. That seems to be part of the process, and that does help. Jacob is the name I gave him. To acknowledge that he actually existed, he was here. I do believe that I will meet him. How would I? How, if a post-abortive man came to me, how would I help? Well, I would point him towards a there are specialist centres around the country. It's called the Fergrove Centre here in Southampton. I'd point him towards somewhere like that, where they know exactly what they're doing and how to deal with post-abortive men. By the way, there are a lot of men who are now going to these places.
Interesting. Gosh, that's a bold statement.